Get started here. I've got some clay ready to go. I'm going to use my sponge here and just clean off the wheel head. I can do that while it's spinning. And I just want to get this to be a nice clean surface. I also want to start with just a little bit of moisture on the back so that it can stick. I'm going to take the ball of clay and just kind of, I don't want it to be flat, kind of flying saucer-ish, and then, I'm going to turn that off, slap it down right in the middle. Most of your problems over the next couple of weeks are going to start right about now. If your clay isn't in the middle of the wheel, there's nothing you can do. Your clay will always fail if it's not centered. So centering is the most important part. You can see that there's some wobble to it right now. It's not quite centered, and so that's going to be my main objective right now, is just to get it centered. To do that, just a couple of techniques that we can talk about. I want to keep it good and wet, so I've got my sponge and I've got my water handy all the time. I want to keep my hands good and wet, so I'm going to dunk those in. And what I'm doing is I'm using the fatty part of my left hand. My left hand, because the wheel's spinning right at me, so I'm using the force of the wheel to do the work for me. The wheels are numbered, and what I'm actually doing is kind of sitting with my legs against the tub, my elbow against my leg, and I'm coming in from an angle and I'm pushing the clay towards the number. So I'm actually kind of pushing it like so in this direction. I'm actually leaning my left shoulder down and leaning right into the clay. So I'm not doing all the work in my wrist, I'm actually doing all the work in my back by pushing forward in my shoulders. My right hand is guiding it from the top. And eventually I'll push down with this hand, or I could squeeze it together and pull it up. But for the most part, I'm guiding with my right hand and pushing with my left towards the number. So pushing down with the fatty part of my thumb, pushing forward right against the back with the fatty part of my wrist, palm, and I'm pushing. Pushing with both hands. Always very slowly off. I'm not really using my fingertips. I'm scraping off a little bit of that clay from the bottom of my thumbnail just so that I always have good pressure against the very bottom of the clay. That's basically the goal right there. Depending on what you're making, and the first thing you're going to make is a 5-inch cylinder. You want to have the base, the size of the clay, approximately the size that you ultimately want it to be, diameter-wise. So I'm going to actually squeeze this together. You're going to see it get a little taller. The clay is a little stiff today. And a couple of things that I want to mention. First of all, when you're centering, whenever you're putting pressure on the clay, you'd be surprised how much it's angled over. If I take my hand off really quick, it's going to be off center. So even though it looks centered now, it's not anymore. So always take your hands off really slowly in order to keep it centered. The other thing is just keep your wheel going once you get started. There's no reason to stop. If you get in the habit of stopping, I've seen students put their hands on it like this and then they'll go, and that can usually mess you up. You want it spinning, get your hands wet, and then approach it while it's moving. There's really no reason to turn it off once you get started, except to check the depth, which I'll show you in a minute. By the way, I've got the speed going about, that's full speed. I'm at about half, maybe a little less than half right now. So I'm going to just flatten the top, slowly off, and it should look like that. It should be just right in the center. It doesn't look like it's wobbling.